That shows billion to one that intuition is real, like hundreds of billions to one. Something is going on. But again, it wasn't 100% either. So in short, intuition is real, but it's not always reliable, but it does increase the odds. When you go to a business meeting and someone is giving you a proposal and you feel something off, that could be your intuition. If you are going on a date with someone for the first time and you feel something off, that could be your intuition. But maybe you also feel something right. That's your intuition. And so we have to learn to discern. Now, when you get really good at intuition, what happens is you're able to bring in an additional faculty to augment your intelligence. This is where the magic happens. In Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs, and I'm picking Jobs because he's probably the greatest entrepreneur of our time, right? The first man to build $1 trillion company. Isaacson said that Jobs believed in prana, Prajna, or an intuitive understanding of the world. Jobs was introduced to this concept during his travels through India. I'm sure you've heard the story. Steve Jobs backpacked across India with Daniel Schotsky, his friend. And Isaacson said that Jobs' leaps were so imaginative. They were not coming from pure intellect. He called it like they were magical leaps of a genius magician. And that is what intuition does.
Vishen Lakhiani, namaste. It's an honor having you on the Ranveer Show. I'm very familiar with your work at Mindvalley. What surprised me was that you began it in 2003, and I'm going to ask you a ton of questions about Mindvalley itself. But initially, I'd love to introduce you to my listeners through your story. So, why do you think life chose you to do the work that you're doing? What's the backstory?
Well, okay. Well, firstly, for your listeners who might not have heard of Mindvalley, let me just tell you what Mindvalley is doing. What I'm trying to do is to give every human being on the planet the advantages in life of having the best education in the world, a Harvard degree, plus more, plus being in great shape, being in great mental conditioning, having the mindset of professional athletes, of billionaires, the best education in the world. But unlike a Harvard degree, to do it for under $500. We're taking the world's best education, which one could say is Harvard, making it even better than Harvard by using exponential technologies, bringing the price down to $500 so anyone can afford it. That is my mission in life for the next 10 years at least. So just this week, I issued a challenge to Harvard. I issued $1 million bet that starting 2025, if you take a group of students who are studying at Harvard and studying at Mindvalley, after 5 years, you measure who is most successful in life by a set of predetermined markers that scientists can determine to ensure they are fair. We will beat Harvard. And I'm betting $1 million of my own money against Harvard University. And I'm betting that we can do this because, I hope Harvard wins. So I want to give them a chance. So I'm going to do it in a scenario where my graduates, they pay 1/100th the price of Harvard. So I'm giving Harvard 100x price advantage. And I bet you I'm still going to win. Now, how am I doing this? Over the last decade or so, I've been assembling a team. I've been building a company called Mindvalley. And my goal at Mindvalley is to completely disrupt education globally. We are already at this point, probably indisputably the #1 education platform on the planet that any living adult can enroll in. Relative to money, we are probably the most powerful product you can buy, better than a Tesla, better than an iPhone, because Mindvalley completely changes your life. We extend your lifespan. We improve your peace of mind. We bring you all the great teachers in the world and give you that wisdom. We connect you to a tribe. We take away loneliness. We take away anguish. We give you hope. And people who go through Mindvalley emerge like lights in the world. They are the best people out there. The trick is to do this for as many people as possible for under $500. We used to be about $2,000. We've been bringing the price lower and lower and lower as we scale because anyone, a boy or girl growing up in a village in India, right, should be able to have access to the best education. So that's where Mindvalley is going. And the reason I'm talking to you is because we're about to expand massively in India. We're about to launch Mindvalley India in a matter of months.
Oh, beautiful. I'm very familiar with all the kind of waves Mind Valley is making.
You are, but I want to make sure everyone in India is familiar, because in a few years, Mindvalley will be the most important education institute in India.
Yeah, I think people have woken up to it. We see a lot of Mind Valley ads on our YouTube as well. And I feel generally our audience on this particular podcast is very inclined towards self help and self improvement. Anyone who's heard of self help or self improvement as concepts has heard of Mind Valley. But what I want to take you back is to 2003 and pre 2003. Again, I'm completely familiar with what happened. In a podcast with Jay Shetty, you spoke about an ayahuasca experience you had and how you kind of just knew that you had to create Mind Valley in life. And if I dial you even further back into your teenage, you kind of fought your own teenage insecurities and the older version of yourself through a concept like meditation. So you're someone who's completely embraced, these, in India, we call it hatke, which are slightly alternative mindsets to change yourself, your company, and then the world through your work. So could you run us through that entire journey as well?
Okay, so you often bring up the date 2003. Mindvalley was started in 2003, but just as a correction, Mindvalley was just a company name I registered. The Mindvalley that you see today really started in 2013. Mindvalley is an education company. Back in 2003, I registered a company. And this is a good tip for anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur. I believe the universe rewards intention. I remember reading a book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And he says, don't just make a decision, take some action, right? So when I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I went online and I searched for a good domain name for the future company I would start. And the domain name I found was rainbridge.com. And so I thought, this is amazing. I'm going to start a company called Rainbridge, and we're going to make a website. But very soon, I realized how depressing the name Rainbridge sounded. It sounded like you were a little troll under a bridge as it's raining. So I searched for another name. I found Mindvalley, and thank God I registered that. So that is 2003. We tried many different things. We were selling meditation CDs. We launched the world's second biggest social bookmarking engine. We developed web applications. I developed an early version of Instagram that ultimately failed because mobile phones were not sophisticated back in 2004. And eventually, 10 years later, because it does take a while, I stumbled upon the idea that is Mindvalley today. And that was education and transforming education and infusing it with relevancy, the skills that truly matter to human beings today. That's Mindvalley right now. But it's been a 10-year journey, Ranveer.
But what are the skills that matter today? Like, why do you think the edtech platform that you've built stands out from the rest?
Absolutely. Okay, so that same question you asked me, I'm a big guy in research. So I went deep and I sought the number one living philosopher in the world. Can you guess who he is? The world's most undisputed number one living philosopher, the most cited academic in America.
Jordan Peterson?
Not Jordan Peterson. No, absolutely not. Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber.
Okay. Got it.
Ken Wilber founded integral theory. He's developing sort of a theory of everything to connect all of the wisdom in the world. Jordan Peterson is a good philosopher. He's a great writer, but his claim to fame mostly came from, like being political and poking things that get conversation. I strongly disagree with many of Jordan Peterson's ideas. Respectfully, I think he's a wonderful guy, but disagree with him. Ken Wilber, however, is brilliant. Now, Ken Wilber, I interviewed him on Friday. We've had many conversations over the years, but just last Friday in an interview for my podcast, I decided to ask him, summarize how should we reform global education to give every human being, the best wisdom, knowledge, transformation that we as a species deserve. And Wilber said this. He said, today we educate not for the complete human being. We educate for a tiny slice of what it is to be human. Not even human 101. We're not even there yet. We educate for human 0.1. Wilber went on to say there are three things we need to educate for. The first is multiple lines of intelligence. Today we know that there are at least 12 different types of intelligence, but the entire basis for education which started in the 14th century in Bologna, Italy. The modern idea of the university is to educate for 2 of these 12 lines. The first is verbal, speaking, communicating. The second is cognition, thinking, right? These are not bad. We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to think, but there's so much more. You can educate for aesthetics, sense of art, beauty, design. When Steve Jobs was at Reed College, he skipped all his classes except for a class on calligraphy. And you've heard that legendary story. That class on calligraphy developed Jobs in a sense of aesthetics. That aesthetics became the hallmark of the Macintosh computer. You can educate for values. How do we create people who are more loving, who are more kind, who are more compassionate? A great tragedy happening in the world today is that so many people vote for hate mongers, for nationalist politicians. Look at America. 42% of college graduates in America voted for Donald Trump in the last election. How do we account for that? Why did they vote for a man who so badly spoke about Muslims, who so badly spoke about Mexicans? We don't educate for values. We don't educate. And then there are other lines of intelligence, right? There is self-awareness. There is spiritual intelligence. This is what the great teachers and sages and mystics of the world, ranging from India to China to the Middle East, have been speaking about for generations. We educate for none of that. So that's the first category, multiple lines of intelligence. Now, the second category of education has to do with the idea of educating people to expand their levels of compassion to greater and greater degrees of wholeness. In 1872, Charles Darwin predicted that mankind is going to start becoming more and more and more unified. He said it'll become self-evident that tribes will unite to become nations, but then nations will unite to become unions of nations. And unions of nations will continue uniting until we have earth-centered identity. He called it diffusion of sympathy. And he said, this is just where human beings are going to go. Ken Wilber, 100 years later, said this is one of the most important things we can educate people for. Most human beings, okay, are what you call the ethnocentric level of existence. 70% of human beings are ethnocentric. So they believe I'm kind, I'm wonderful, I'm amazing, but they cap that with people of the same color, religion, ethnicity, or nationality. This is the illusion. Wilber says we have to educate people for world-centric identity. Why is it that growing up in an Indian family, I'm a Sindhi, okay? So that's my ethnicity. I remember growing up and my grandfather, who was a wonderful man, super kind, super generous, but he existed at the ethnocentric level. He probably would have been very disappointed with me if I married someone who was of a darker Indian skin tone. And, you know, I ended up marrying someone of a completely different race. And I remember there were members of my family, ethnocentric, kind, awesome, smart people who were upset with that. Because how dare I marry someone outside the right religion and the right race? This is ethnocentrism. It exists in the world today. 70% of the population is there. And this is what we have to educate human beings to move beyond. We have to move people to what is called world centrism. World centrism is where you basically understand that color is simply a function of melanin in the skin, that religion is beautiful, but all religions have equal parts truth, equal parts bullshit, and that national borders are arbitrary and random. Sindh, which is the part of India that my grandfather left in 1939, was part of Afghanistan before 1850, part of India between 1850 and 1947, part of Pakistan since 1947. So what the hell am I? We take these borders to be so cast in stone, and that is where things get messed up. So we got to educate to go towards world-centric identity, but there's a level beyond. World-centric itself means we see all human beings as one. That's great. But we need to go beyond because our planet is going through an upheaval right now. Global warming is going to be fundamentally damaging to our species. We need to educate to what is called cosmocentric identity. And this means that we become human beings who seek to be one with nature, or in scientific terms, to create a civilization that is net positive to nature. For every year human beings are on the planet is getting better and better and better and better. Look at ants. Ants have 3 times the biomass of human beings. Yet for every year ants are on the planet gets better. We pillage the planet. That's the second pillar. Now, the third pillar is the most interesting if you're Indian. It is teaching people how to access altered states of experience. The great Indian mystics knew this. They knew that we are not just waking consciousness. There is the feeling of oneness. There's the samadhi experience. There are kriya experiences. There's lucid dreams. There's out-of-body experiences. We need to teach people to access altered states. You mentioned ayahuasca earlier. Plant medicine is one means, but not the most efficient. And when you bring these things together, multiple lines of intelligence, moving towards cosmocentrism, which is species-centered identity, and then altered states of existence going within, now you have education. And that's just the starting point. This is what Mindvalley is doing.
So I have a couple of questions specifically speaking about education. Firstly, as a species, what do you think is the next stage of our evolution? Because, a lot of intellectuals all over the world are talking about how we're still evolving. This isn't our final form and we're evolving into something else. And it's very likely that with advancements in technology, with information being this spread out, we're going to be evolving into a newer version of ourselves. So that's the first question, that where do you think we're going as a species? And the second thing I'd like to ask you is, again, and this is from a very Indian perspective, but Indians like to know how your product is going to actually add value to their life in terms of only money. Like, I understand, I hear you completely. But do you think that the skills that you speak of will make you a better professional? Will it earn you a fatter pay package? Will it give you better business?
Absolutely. So you asked a whole string of questions there, right? So first, let's answer the really easy one. Where's the species evolving? I just gave you a clue. We're evolving to become a species that is going to be embracing multiple lines of intelligence. The artist is as important as the engineer. Yet I grew up in an Indian family, and if you didn't become a lawyer, engineer, or entrepreneur, you became a family failure. So we got to stop this thinking, this occupation bad, this occupation good, because it leads so many Indians to misery. And funny enough, I was just watching an Indian movie last night, 3 Idiots, and I was just laughing my ass off when I was looking at all the things that happen at an Indian engineering school. So I get that because I came from that culture. I became an engineer because my parents wanted to be an engineer. I became an engineer because in the 90s, Bill Gates visited India. It was all over the news. And my grandfather sat me down and he said, you must be like Bill Gates. Go into computers. It's going to make you rich. And so I actually went into computers. I got a job at Microsoft. I became one of Bill Gates' employees. I remember being invited to his house on Lake Washington. He was cooking burgers for all of the employees. And everyone was gathered around him. All the young engineers were so excited to shake his hand. I couldn't shake his hand because I was miserable at Microsoft. And I knew I hated my job. And I quit 2 weeks later. Or rather, I got fired. I had to say I quit so I didn't, I didn't get in trouble with my family, but I got fired. I got myself fired. And you know what I did next? I joined a nonprofit. Something that in many Indian families would be considered something for losers, right? Didn't make any money. I lived below the poverty line. But in that nonprofit, I discovered the world. I discovered how to speak. I met the woman who I would later marry and have 2 kids with. I met the man who I would later start a business with. And so I believe that life places you in the right place at the right time. Your soul knows more than your tradition, than your family. You have to follow and listen to your soul. Steve Jobs said, listen to your gut or intuition. They somehow already know who you are to become. Yet, in Indian culture, we say, be the engineer, be the entrepreneur. If you open up the Mindvalley app right now and you specify your career, we deliberately put 8,000 different careers. We analyze all the possible careers out there. We put 8,000 different careers. There's a reason for that. We then ask you to add a second career identity. So what is 8,000 times 8,000? Let's do the math, okay? So on Mindvalley, we're not asking you to label yourself a lawyer or a doctor. You have to add 2 careers. That is 64 million. Then we ask you to add a third identity. So we're going to times 64 million times 8,000. Boom. This is roughly 512 billion identities. Now, why do we do that? It's because when you decide you're going to be one career, you put yourself in a box. The truly great revolutionaries of the world combine careers. We live in this distorted society, like encouraged by BS modern education, that you are one thing. You are the doctor, you are the lawyer. I'm a writer, but I'm also a computer engineer. I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm also a podcast host. I'm also a father, and I'm fucking good at all of it. And that's what makes me me. Everyone should have 3 careers and merge it together. Be very good at 2 or 3 things. That is the education we're doing. Now, how does Mindvalley get you there? You asked a relevant question. How does Mindvalley help you make money? Recently, I was having a live call with some of our students, and there was a woman who started a company, a handbag company, after listening to Money EQ by Ken Honda. That's a money program on Mindvalley, and it teaches you the right mindset on money. The first thing you want to do to get rich is to fix your money mindset, to remove all the beliefs that limit you from money. In 1 month, this woman, her name was Renee, started a handbag business, and in 1 month, she made more money than the previous 12 months. And now she's an entrepreneur. Now, what was that mindset shift? In school, they teach you need to budget. But in Mindvalley, we actually take a more professional approach. A little bit of budgeting is fine, but you got to play and invest in money, overcome fear of failure, experiment with multiplying that money, experiment with entrepreneurship. Budgeting puts you in a scarcity mindset. You must be in an expansive mindset. That's how Renee became an entrepreneur. So many Mindvalley people become incredibly wealthy. Now, one of the things we are doing right now is we are bringing entrepreneurship training in Mindvalley. We just announced it on Friday. And because we're expanding to India, many of the entrepreneurs we are bringing on board are Indian legends. They may not be in India, but they are Indian ethnically. For example, Naveen Jain, who just became the first private citizen to get permission to land a robot on the moon. Naveen grew up in a village in India. He went on to go to America, worked at Microsoft, and started several billion-dollar companies. He has 3 kids, all of whom are graduates from Ivy League universities and who have started incredible NGOs. Naveen Jain's program is on Mindvalley. He teaches people to dream big. But great, you dream big. Now, how do you execute? So our new program is with Miki Agrawal. Miki Agrawal is an Indian woman in Canada who started $200 million companies. She started a women's underwear company called Things. She started a bidet company. And now as a mother, she started a diaper company for biodegradable diapers. It's probably going to be her 3rd $100 million company. Mickey knows how to build $100 million companies. You want to learn from her. She is choosing to teach on Mindvalley. So that is how Mindvalley adds more income to your career. Probably if you take Naveen Jain's course, Mickey's course, you take my course, you'll probably be wealthier than getting a Harvard degree. Because you learn from people who have done it before, not from professors in a university who have never built a $100 million business. Mentorship matters. But Mindvalley also, we're building a better social utility. So as you learn, you're plugged into other students. We call it guilds. So if you decide that branding is one of the places you want to learn, and then say, let's say writing is another skill, you're plugged into guilds with other brand experts, other writers, and we are building a brain-to-brain interface where you get to multiply each other's intelligence. That's some of the fancy tech that's going to be emerging in the next 1 year. Any graduate from Mindvalley has access to more brain power because of our brain-to-brain connection utility than a graduate from a regular university. More on that in a bit, but that's some advanced tech that's coming thanks to the rise of exponential technologies.
So, I have 2 questions to ask you on a very personal level. The first is a personal question, which is something I ask all my guests because this podcast is a reflection of my evolution as a person as well. The first question is I constantly feel a bit too hungry for more. And I don't know where to draw that line in terms of settling for where I am and just being at peace with what I've achieved till now versus kind of always wanting more. And I'm sure you've watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. So that messes that, while it does give you a lot of motivation, like as a young 20 something man, it does a lot of harm to your mindset as well. So I see the same thing in you. I feel like you've gone on the same journey that I'm on right now. So how did you overcome that phase? Because I'm dead sure you had that phase. I'm asking you on a very personal level. And the second thing is the topic you spoke about a lot with Jay Shetty, which is the intuitive net. I'd love for you to expand on that because I do feel like these two questions are linked, but I will let you take over.
So you pick, because you've asked me two big questions.
Okay, let's go with the first one first about how do you know when hunger can actually cause more harm than do you good?
Okay, so first let's talk about what you mean by hunger, right? What I believe you're saying is desire. It's desire, it's one thing, it's the idea that you want to do more, you want to accomplish more, you want to get more. Is this correct?
I want to do more. Like I want to be able to create all the products that I can visualize in my head, which I know I'll visualize which I know I'll be able to do in the next 10 years, but I want to do it sooner than 10 years.
Okay, so let's go back to that idea of hunger, okay? To understand where I'm going to go with this, you have to understand the concept of hunger itself. When you talk about hunger, do you always eat when you're hungry?
Yeah.
You always eat when you're hungry. Good, then you don't understand hunger. You see, there are 6 types of hunger. When we talk about hunger in the body, there are 6 types of hunger. Hunger can actually be a biophysical response where your body needs water. Because in the old days, water was dirty, we got water from fruit. So you could drink a glass of water and that might stop your hunger. Hunger could also be nutritional hunger. It means you haven't been eating nutritional food, you've been eating junk, so you need some nutrition. Hunger could also be just a normal response that your stomach is empty. We're not trained to recognize that our stomach is empty, and so we feel we got to fill it. That's actually a bad thing. So that is actually a good type of hunger. It means, oh, your stomach is empty. No problem. You don't have to do anything. When you actually get educated in hunger, and interestingly enough, Mindvalley educates people to recognize 6 different types of hunger so they can respond to their body correctly. When you educate that, you understand that hunger is an illusion. Human beings simplify a complex world into words. When you give all of these 6 different reactions that your stomach is having and you call it all hunger, you don't know what to do. But when you differentiate into thirst, nutritional hunger, empty stomach, actual hunger where you're starving, right? Then you know the right action to take. There's even such a thing as emotional hunger, where you feel hungry when you're getting through a downward emotion, and you can actually solve that through meditation, and that feeling disappears. So you got to recognize the feeling. So in your case, we have to first look at what you mean by hunger and break it down, what you mean by desire and break it down. And there are multiple forms of desire. There's desire where you want something and you feel it's hard to get, and you feel envious, or you feel a negative charge because someone else has that and you don't. That is the type of wanting that you want to avoid. But there's desire where you want something and you know you're going to get it, and you want it because it's going to be phenomenal for you. The desire for money, the desire for the expensive car, that's not bad. But sometimes it's masking something else. For example, the expensive car could be because you need a certain form of like self-identity or self-confidence that you are lacking. I, for example, drive a $300 bicycle. I have no desire for an expensive car. Then there could be the desire to go forth and heal the world, the desire to serve humanity, the desire that, propels someone to be a monk or to be a billionaire, to serve humanity. That is probably one of the best forms of desires. So the question is, what is your hunger?
The third one, for sure, the third one.
Good. If it's the third one, then you're on the right track. Now, if you have that third form of hunger, which I do, which Naveen Jain does, which Mickey Agrawal does, that's why Mickey has started $300 million companies. It's the same hunger that pushes someone like Jay Shetty forward. It is desire to serve. You're on the right track. And that is the best form of hunger to have. But here's the thing. In my book, The Buddha and the Badass, I explain that all of us need to reconcile these 2 archetypes of our being. The Buddha and the badass. The badass is the disruptor, the innovator, the person who wants to change the world. That is phenomenal. But you got to also embrace your inner Buddha. Your inner Buddha is your spiritual anchor. If you don't embrace your inner Buddha, the badass could stress you out. You could overwork. You could screw up your cognitive abilities because you're not getting enough sleep. You're not exercising well. You're not taking care of your health. But if you are rock solid in your inner Buddha, and you're also using some of the other spiritual tools such as being able to use the power of your mind to manifest, tools such as intuition, tools such as being able to align with higher intelligence to get the right guidance. Now you move towards your desires with ease. And eventually you move towards your desires with such ease that they are no longer a desire. They are an inevitability that you simply know is coming. This is the highest form of manifesting, expectancy. You just know it's coming. I can speak so confidently of Mindvalley being the most important education company in the world because I just know it's coming. There's no doubt. Like I don't doubt that if I breathe right now, I'm going to take air in my body. So the great trick, Ranveer, is to take this desire that you have and move it towards such profound expectancy that it is inevitable. Now, this is what spiritual teachers sometimes call being in a state of surrender. When you're in that state of surrender, you just know it's coming and you operate in a different way. Now, we can go more into why that works, but I'll pause there.
The podcast you did with Jay Shetty probably was the most impactful podcast I heard this year. I've spoken about that podcast on many episodes of this particular podcast. And I mean, it shifted things in my own head for me. I actually started applying a couple of the things you spoke about, be it manifestation, be it being conscious of that intuitive net. So while I wish to speak to you a lot about my personal questions on that front, maybe let's answer that intuitive net question first. Let's explain it to this audience because it can be a slightly deeper concept than what people are expecting. So let's go for that and then I'll take you ahead.
Okay, so firstly, the reason that podcast, so I'm happy you said that podcast was the best podcast. That is validation to what I'm saying. What you experienced on that podcast wasn't Jay Shetty interviewing me. Jay's a very close friend. Jay let me go and speak about what Mindvalley is doing. And if that touched you, that's evidence that everyone listening to this right now should go to mindvalley.com and become a member and enroll in our university. Okay, so I just want to point that out there. That was a taste of the Mindvalley philosophy and the Mindvalley way of viewing the world. Just go to mindvalley.com/start and become a member. And soon everyone who joins from India is going to be put in our private Indian social network. And we're going to be amplifying their intelligence, connecting them with other people in India, even introducing them through a predictive algorithm to potential allies, friends, gym buddies, even the person you might fall in love with. So that's where we are going with India. You're going to see all of that unroll very fast, and you're going to see more and more Indian teachers come on. Mahatria, maybe Sri Ravi Shankar, because there's so much great wisdom in India. Hint, potentially Sadhguru as well. We're currently in talks. So a lot of amazing Indian teachers, Indian entrepreneurs, and so on. Okay, now let's go back to the question on intuition. Is that what you'd like me to address?
Yes, the intuition and your intuitive net that you spoke of.
Okay, so I believe that all of us have this power of intuition, but the modern world teaches us to ignore it. So there's a new field of science. It's called perceptual diversity, or rather it's a term that anthropologists use. Perceptual diversity is when you perceive the world through a diverse set of input, not just your eyes or your ears or your fingertips. Perceptual diversity, according to an anthropologist, Bourguignon, in a 1973 paper, 90% of cultures in the world had some form of perceptual diversity. If you go back, to the roots of Indian culture, when you look at meditation, when you look at prayer, all of that were perceptual diversity. If you read the book, Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, he talks about all of these instances where insights would come to him, where he would see apparitions. He talks about how the sages communicated. This is all perceptual diversity. It was beyond the physical senses. But as the world goes more and more and more and more and more rational, there's a backlash towards religion. But the problem is, while religion does deserve sometimes a bit of a poke, because there's a lot of nonsense in religion, we end up saying that anything that cannot be explained by science is rubbish. And that's where we hurt ourselves. Intuition? No, that's not real. Turns out, not only is it real, but science in the last 20 years is validating it more and more and more. So, for example, there was a study done at the University of Edinburgh. It was called the Gansfield Test Experiments. And they would take two people and they would put these people in different rooms. One person would be put into a meditative state using what is called a sensory deprivation chamber, basically a float tank, right? Float tank, they are there, so they cannot feel. When you turn off all your senses, like you go into this intuitive state. The other person is in a room where he or she is watching a television screen. They show you one of four images. It could be horses running through a stream. It could be an image of a war-torn landscape. It could be an image of a gorgeous building or an image of an apple on a table. Now, they then wake up the person who's in the sensory deprivation chamber. They show that person those four images, and they're like, what did the other person in the room look at? Now, if being purely rational and being rooted in probability, what are the odds that the person who was woken up would guess the right image, assuming there's no such thing as intuition? So 25%.
Yeah.
Okay. But it turns out that in the Ganfield test studies, with even untrained subjects, the actual odd was 33%. 33%. Now that's pretty interesting. That shows billion to one that intuition is real, like hundreds of billions to one. Something is going on. But again, it wasn't 100% either. So in short, intuition is real. It's not always reliable, but it does increase the odds. When you go to a business meeting and someone is giving you a proposal and you feel something off, that could be your intuition. If you are going on a date with someone for the first time and you feel something off, that could be your intuition. But maybe you also feel something right. That's your intuition. And so we have to learn to discern. Now, when you get really good at intuition, what happens is you're able to bring in an additional faculty to augment your intelligence. This is where the magic happens. In Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs, and I'm picking Jobs because he's probably the greatest entrepreneur of our time, right? The first man to build $1 trillion company. Isaacson said that Jobs believed in prana, Prajna, or an intuitive understanding of the world. Jobs was introduced to this concept during his travels through India. I'm sure you've heard the story. Steve Jobs backpacked across India with Daniel Schotsky, his friend. And Isaacson said that Jobs' leaps were so imaginative. They were not coming from pure intellect. He called it like they were magical leaps of a genius magician. And that is what intuition does. The vision that I'm building right now for Mindvalley, a large part of that vision, when I spoke earlier about connecting all our people in India, being able to predict who's going to be your friends, that vision came to me in a 7-hour trip on ayahuasca. And then I refined that using the Silva method, which is one of the most advanced altered state meditation programs in Mindvalley, refining it, putting all the pieces together, and then we raised a large sum on it, and now we're building it. I build products by going deep into my intuition and then understanding what the universe wants me to deliver to the world. And then I find when I trust and I go into that, everything, in a state of surrender, everything flows flawlessly towards the outcome. This is how I know Mindvalley is building the most advanced education curriculum in the world. The universe has our back. The universe is guiding us. Everything is moving towards this goal because it's noble, it's good, it can change humanity and move us towards becoming a true cosmocentric, earth-centric society. That anyone can do that. Everyone. You don't have to want to change the world. Maybe you have a book that you're dying to get out. Maybe you have a podcast idea. Maybe you're trying to change the way your business runs. You got to learn to go within first.
Yeah. I mean, kind of a rude question, but is there any moment now where you meet any form of stress in your mind? Because you seem like, I mean, I feel you're a very divinely guided person. I feel like, you've landed up in the right place at the right time. So again, from the outside, it seems like you're kind of a train which is on like a very sturdy, stable railway track. So it would be hard for me to imagine that your mental peace gets shaken up at all.
Very rarely, but it does. You don't want to completely eliminate stress. So, for example, if you're crossing the road, and all of us, if you're crossing the road and you're busy, with your phone or whatever, or your mind is somewhere, and all of a sudden you hear a horn and a bus is like this close, you want your body to create a stress response, so you jump out of the way. You don't want to eliminate stress. It will freaking kill you. Stress is a safety response. But what happens in the world today is that we get stress for non-threatening situations, okay? Sales go down and we don't know why, or we lose a business deal, or we're working with someone and they're stressed about something that happened with their family and they snap at you and then you get stressed. You're not going to die. You're not in any harm's way. But the response still happens in your body. It's a biochemical response, but you can train the way your brain responds to it so you don't hurt yourself. Because that stress response, while it can get you to leap out of the way of a moving bus, it also slowly kills your body. Stress has a damaging effect on your body. And so the less stress, the longer you live. Stress, for example, shortens telomere length, which is one of the core biomarkers of aging. So you can train that response. Now, how we do it in Mindvalley is, of course, meditation is a great way. Now I'm using a new tool by Paul McKenna. He produced a program on Mindvalley called Everyday Bliss. Those of you who are Mindvalley members, it's in your account. And he developed a form of hypnotic trance audio that programs your subconscious to deal with stress in a different way. So what I'm finding right now is that as I'm on day 6 of the program, it's a 21-day program. I'm finding that when I sleep and I measure my heart rate variability, which is another measure of stress, I'm suddenly so much more calm, right? And so you can subconsciously train your way to become resistant to stress using these types of technologies. Base level, you got to meditate. You want to go advanced, you use something like Everyday Bliss by Mindvalley to trance yourself, speak to your subconscious to change your physiological response to stress so you're always perfectly calm in non-threatening situations. But you're still alert, if someone runs with you with a knife or if a bus is barreling down the street towards you.
Gorgeous. And coming back to your Indian roots, as well as your global entrepreneur within your mind, I'm going to ask the question to both these two versions of Vishen. How do you look at India? How do you look at the future of India? What do you think India's role is going to be on the world stage going forward? Because this has been a cultural hub for the world for centuries now. And I feel like we've had a bit of a dip in the last 200, 300 years in terms of being a cultural hub. And there's numbers to back that, where the GDP of the country 200, 250 years back was bigger than the GDP of all of Europe put together. And we were reduced to one of the lowest in the world right after we got independence. But I feel we're bouncing back, especially over the next 20, 30, 40 years, especially the biggest businessmen in this country believe so. So I'm asking you from a very objective perspective. While I know your roots are based in this country, you've seen the rest of the world. You've spoken to global entrepreneurs. Where do you think our country is going? And I'm also going to request you to kind of dive into your own intuition and answer this question.
Right. Well, the unique thing about India, right, is that everybody treats it as one country. But India is like Europe. You go to Tamil Nadu, you go to Punjab, you go to what remains of Sindh in India, and it's as different as Germany and Belgium and Estonia. So India is so different, state by state, region by region. It's a beautiful amalgamation, 860 different dialects. And so there is no one India, there's a multitude of India. But for me to answer that question, I can't, because I've moved towards a cosmocentric worldview. In other words, I appreciate my Indian roots, but I also appreciate the side of me that's American, the side of me that's Malaysian, the side of me that's Estonian. I'm a member of Earth first. My Indian DNA is secondary. And so I love India, but I don't love India more than I love Pakistan, or I love China, or I love Europe. I want to see all of humanity elevate. And so I have a great appreciation for my Indian roots. I told you last night I was watching an Indian movie by myself, laughing my face off because it was so good, Three Idiots. And I was just I just love seeing India in that movie. And it's that bit of like time-wise separation that prevents me from accurately answering your question with true knowledge, I still have to go to India and discover that country anew, and it's changing so fast.
Right. I mean, and I feel like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of the Mind Valley concepts, wisdom, there are parallels with ancient yogic culture from this country as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Now
if
you will notice something very unique in Mind Valley. You will notice a huge amount of Indian faces on Mind Valley. Now there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Primarily, our audience is 54% American, but you'll notice a huge amount of Indian faces, from me to Sri Kumar Rao to Naveen Jain to Mickey Agrawal, and there's more. There's more Indian faces coming, and the reason for that is because there is a desire in me to show that Indians can be extraordinary individuals. We just did a fitness program, and we featured a picture of Kumail Nanjiani. I don't know if you know, the Indian actor who became
Yeah.
really buff, right? Thanks to Kumail, like, Indian men are no longer seeing as being. And so, but all of that was done deliberately. I'm branding India and Indian culture in a subtle way through Mind Valley, which is why you see a huge Indian impact in Mind Valley.
Beautiful. And
That is absolutely 100% deliberate.
And I hear you speaking of autobiography of a yogi a lot, which is another hot topic on this particular podcast. We keep talking about that book. But if you had to reference other reading material, for people to kind of just open up to these possibilities in this kind of world, things that had an influence on you growing up, could you kind of direct people?
The book that started it all for me, The Silver Mind Control Method for Getting Help from Your Other Side. If there's an award for little known books with maximum impact, it's this. Notice there's even nothing in the back cover. That's how little known this book is, right? But the Silver Method, I'm now the face of the Silver Method. The Silver Method is now on Mind Valley. If you're a Mind Valley member, go to mindvalley.com and start the Silver Method program. It teaches you how to access altered states. In 30 days, your life will be transformed. If there's a program that can teach you how to get deep into your spiritual core and experience polyphasic living, tap into intuition to the point of waking psychic ability, this is it, right? This is on Mind Valley. That's the first thing I would recommend to anyone. And then, you can get this book if you can find it. It's very hard to find, but you can also get my book, The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, or The Buddha and the Badass, both of which are very easily available in India. They were both New York Times bestsellers.
Got it. Beautiful. Vishen Lakhiani, thank you. We've reached the end of the podcast. I really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge. Of course, as with any podcast, I use this as a personal mentoring session for myself. So I appreciate that side of the conversation as well. And you answered some questions that have been like bothering me for a while now. So from the bottom of my heart, brother, thank you. God bless you. And I hope that you achieve everything you're meant to achieve in this lifetime and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ranveer. I appreciate that.